So good afternoon. Welcome to our advanced webinar on AvPlan EFB. My name is Bevan Anderson. I'm the founder and CEO of AvSoft Australia, the people that create AvPlan EFB. And we will be doing, an advanced webinar on AvPlan EFB. So it's my hope that you at least understand how to put a basic flight plan and kind of the structure of the app. So all of this stuff isn't new. By some of your names, we've got a whole range of people that I know have been using it for a while to people that are new to us, and we even have our very first customer online. So yes, thank you very much, because you know who you are. So AvPlan was designed to be a replacement for my kneeboard that I used to take flying. I've been flying for a bit over 30 years now, and a lot of that has been flying IFR. So it was designed to be a replacement for the kneeboard that I used to take flying, and on that I used to have the maps and flight plans clipped on one side, and then the flight plan clipped on one side, and then the maps and charts and things clipped on the other. So strangely enough, when we're in landscape mode, that's the way AvPlan works. So we've got the index of flight plans, or a list of flight plans, on one side, and then the actual plan on the right hand side, and then we can show other things on the right hand side, like airport information and that kind of stuff, weather, text, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Now I'll get into some sort of the more advanced sort of flight planning features, and we'll go through some of the map things that are here that are little or less known. We'll go through the terrain and obstacle database and how we use that and how we present that information. We'll go through the lower safe altitude calculator, how that works, and what you can use that for. The ruler, the heads-up display. We'll look at the way we can overlay airport diagrams and approach plates on the map, how we can create favorites around approach plates and things. So go through some of the workflow things that I personally do before I go flying, and then what we do when we're actually flying. Go through the glide planner, so what it can do and sort of how we use that in post planning and in flight. And then we'll look at some of the more advanced planning options that we have, some of the things around flight status, that kind of stuff. What we can do when we put the plan in edit mode rather than the normal sort of way, we'll create some different types of waypoints, like in a beam waypoint. And we'll do things like we can put special sort of waypoints in our plans for things like top of climb, top of descent, critical points, and that kind of thing. We'll go through different alternates, like Enroute and destination alternates and so on, and how we create them for multiple stage plans. And some of the flight plan filing, and then some of the more detailed weather options. So we've got a lot to get through. There's a few questions coming in, which is great. If you've got one, please feel free. If you've got something as we go along, do your best and I can potentially answer them, or I can wrap that up with a QA session at the end. So one of the most powerful features in the map is sort of interacting with it. So when we're flight planning, the map's very interactive. We can scroll around very quickly, as you can see. The map itself can be either a VFR or IFR chart. It shows things like your flight plan overlaid on the top, which is the red line here we can see here. It shows you things like active restricted areas, which are these red areas, and other airspace. So you can see all the other airspace here as well, which is especially useful in places where you've only got a WAC chart. So for example, here's at Woomera, we just picked all that airspace that you wouldn't otherwise see because it's just a WAC chart. We overlay weather information, so things like metars, which I have turned on at the moment. All these metars are color-coded, so you can see green means it's a lovely VFR day. Blue means it's VFR, but the cloud's less than 3,000 feet and the viz is less than, or the viz is less than 10 k's, or. Yellow means the cloud's less than 1,000 feet, and red, as you can see here, means the cloud's less than 500 feet. So green and blue, it's VFR, yellow and red, potentially IFR. We've got a wind barb here that shows the wind direction, so you can see here that around Victoria it's mostly a northerly. So at a glance we can see what the surface conditions are along our route. Additionally, you'll notice the green dots also appearing in our navlog here on the left-hand side. So you see those coloured dots, and they again correspond with the metars at the places that you're overflying. AvPlan by default works in this split mode with the flight plan here on the left when we're in landscape, and we can choose to have that visible using the little hamburger multi-line button there that shows and hides the navlog. Additionally, there's a setting under user settings, so we can actually have the flight plan on a completely separate pane. So under settings and then user settings, there's an option here to enable a full screen flight plan, which creates a whole separate tab of the app with our navlog on one page. This is particularly useful if you're using an iPad mini in the cockpit and in portrait mode, so then that flight plan can be completely on its own separate pane and we can quickly tap between them. For the purpose of this demonstration, we'll stick it into the normal mode, which is, oh, I say normal, but the way that I use it in, which is like this. The navlog itself is comprised of a series of waypoints, as you can see here. When we're flying down IFR routes, we automatically populate the route identifier and the route lower safe. When we're off an airway, we'll populate the lower safe altitude column with the grid lower safe. So that's that number in brackets. And we'll also show the grid lower safe in the lower safe and heads up display up here at the top. The navlog itself is comprised of altitudes, tracks and headings, TASs and ground speeds, winds and temperatures aloft, which come from the grid winds, and that's based on your departure time and the time it takes to get there. We've got a full 4D wind model, which is both in time and space. So you put a departure time in, and we'll have winds in the app for about 18 to 24 hours in advance, I think, maybe even further. And then the winds will show will depend on the actual departure time you pop in here. So if I put in 0900 this afternoon, you'll notice these winds will probably change than what they were before. To turn off the full screen flight plan, we go settings and then full screen flight plan. Any of these things that you might miss, you'll get it when you can go and look at the recording post our thing. So altitudes, you enter into our flight plan just by typing something in. So 24,000. We'll change it to 240, and that will auto-populate down the plan. So if you want to change altitudes, you need to go to a different point in the flight plan and then change it. That's the default behavior and the way it works at the moment. When we're in fly mode, this changes. So things come a bit less dynamic when we're in fly mode. So there, our map's less responsive. So when we lift our finger, the map stops moving around. But also it changes the way we enter altitude, so we can pick a place here, 25,000 for example, and then it won't auto fill down the plan. So we've just entered in one particular altitude here, 250, and it doesn't auto populate. So one quick way of doing it at the moment is you don't want it to auto fill, just pop it in fly mode, and then when we're finished, we can pop back in plan mode. When interacting with a map, there's a pretty simple rule of thumb. Is if we want to know about something on the ground, it's pretty much a single tap to find out. So if you want to find out what the weather is in Warrnambool, we tap on the map near Warrnambool, and it brings up the METAR and all that sort of stuff. Brings up brings up the nearest item display with things like the weather and locations and things. We've got a scope bar here that we can restrict the scope of that to be aerodromes and so on. So if you want to find out about Warrnambool, even though there's some useful information about how far away it is and the CTAF frequency and so on, we can tap on that place and get the waypoint details view, which shows more detail about Warrnambool, the height above sea level, lat and long, beginning and end to daylight time, the weather, again with that color-coded dot. TAFs, NOTAMs, weather camera, communications information, and then charts. Now to find out about things in the air, that's a double tap. So if I want to find out about airspace information, double tap on the map, and I'll just double tap here and it shows us the restricted areas where I tapped. I can see that one of the ESAIL ones is active between flight level 210 and 6,000 feet. If I want to view any NOTAMs of specific information, I can tap on that. It highlights a particular boundary, as we can see here, and we can find out. There's the NOTAM and so on down the bottom. Okay. Another example would be this area, another red spot. I don't want you, Siri. The red spot here, I double tap on that and it shows me, let's say, NOTAM. I can tap on that and see that, yes, it is a NOTAM that's operating there. It's a big one, 20 kilos, and it's operating from surface to 680 feet AGL. So we're doing a lot more of this, is this interpretation of interpretation graphically of NOTAMs. So there's an example of a drone NOTAM. There's some good examples today of some low jet routes, which you can see here. So this yellow area is a low jet route. It's a NOTAM that will be active in the future. Again, if we want to find out about it, we can double tap on it with our finger and view what the particular NOTAM is. You can see when it's going to be active, valid from, valid to, and we can look at the actual details of the NOTAM. So when that is active, based on these times here, so this 4-hour period here, which is later today, it will turn red. So any airspace that is clear, we know is currently, or the restricted areas are currently deactive. So these ones, for example, any that are red are currently active. Now what I'm going to do is do some sort of advanced user waypoints. So we'll save the changes to that and we'll create quickly create a new flight plan. And we'll go from Raven. We'll use there's multiple ways now of creating a flight plan. So one is just using the quick edit box, YMAY. So So go from here to Albury. So there's our departure point, the critical point, and destination up the top here. Now, as you probably know, we can quickly create a user waypoint. Say we want to fly over, I know there's a lake down here. Here we go, Lake Maricourt. We can insert that as a user waypoint in here. From the nearest items box, it pops up. I'm just tapping on that. And that automatically creates a waypoint in our flight plan. Notice that we've automatically populated the grid lower safe. That's not just based on a straight line. It's based on the great circle of a boundary around our flight plan of about 7 nautical miles. If you want to change the name of this waypoint, and then we can tap on that. We can tap edit to change its name. So by default, we bring up the waypoint details, which is a user waypoint. And we can again see the lat and long, beginning of end of daylight time, and any nearby weather. We can tap this edit button to change its name. So we can change its name up here from a particular boring thing to lake, for example. Tap back to go back. And then that changes its name to lake. You'll notice it's changed in our nav log and also on our flight plan. It's now called lake. So a quick and easy way of creating it. We can also do things like look at where it is on a very detailed Google map as well. So there we go. So that's where we created our waypoint. Now on the planning page, we can actually pick this up and move it. So go planning and then user waypoints. Scroll down and found our lake. There's our lake. So this is the same view we saw before, lat and long, magnetic variation, what forecast area is. This is how we do things like create places from street addresses or known locations. But then we can pick up our waypoint and move it around and say, well, we don't actually want to fly over there. So you can see our user waypoint now in the middle of the lake, which surprisingly is our critical point. Now, AvPlan includes a detailed terrain and obstacle database. And that works in 2 different modes. It can work while you're flight planning to highlight things based on our flight planned altitude. And then when we're in flight, it uses the GPS to color code terrain and so on. So while we're flight planning, we can turn on the obstacle overlay. So map settings, obstacles, which is turned on, and the terrain overlay. The terrain overlay is showing us terrain that's a factor when we're at our flight planned altitude of 0 feet. So we could probably change that to be, say, 2,500, for example. And then it's showing a terrain which is a factor at 2,500 feet. So we might need to fly a bit higher, so I can change that to be 4,500. You notice that all the colors change. So areas that are red are from 500 feet below you to above, and the yellow is 1,500 feet to 500 feet below. Once we've created user waypoints, they're available on your device forever and can be used in subsequent flight plans. So when we're in fly mode, you'll notice that the terrain will turn red again because I'm using the GPS to color code terrain and not my flight planned altitude. So I'm flying along. I'm currently at ground level pretty close to sea level, 52 feet above sea level where I'm here. So that's showing you, what it would look like. So if I go back to plan up here, it goes back to being in plan mode. Right. A couple of things that we've got going on here is also the runway warnings, or the runway end on the departure and destination. So if we know about runways, so for all the paved runways, you'll see these end extensions on each runway. So they're exactly 5 nautical miles long and lead to the end of the runway. And if we know the current surface winds, will show the most interwind runway as green. So for any location where you want to find out, where you can fly a 5-mile final, you pretty much fly to the end of the green line and then down, and away you go. Now, AvPlan EFB incorporates a lower safe altitude calculator. So to bring that up, we can double tap on a particular route, leg of our flight plan. So here we go from Moorabbin to Lake, for example. And it brings up this lower safe altitude calculator. So by default, this is a 7 nautical mile sort of IFR boundary around that route. And that's a perfect great circle. So that's actually the path we would fly if we're following our GPS. We don't just draw these as straight lines just to be easy. No, these are actually curves. Subtle in this respect, but if you look over a longer route, sort of east-west, you'll notice a curve in these lines and not just being a straight line. It's very important when we're doing things like depicting lower safe altitude boundaries, because in cases like this, if we're flying east-west and we're depicting these as just straight lines, we'd actually fly outside that area that we calculated and fly back in. So if you're doing any calculations or based on a straight line on these charts, then it's basically incorrect. So when we double tap, we show you the highest obstacle in that boundary, so 673 feet, and the highest piece of terrain. So if we zoom in, we can see what we've seen. So yes, there's Mount Strath Bogey, 3,304 feet. You notice there's a slight difference. Obviously, the people that make the chart and us use a slightly different terrain database, which is fine. We take whatever value we have and actually round it up to the next 100 feet to take into account any of those things. And then we apply the standard buffers upon that, so which are from the RIP. So the highest piece of terrain is 3,500 feet, as we can see here. So we then add 1,360 feet, or is it 1,340? Whatever's in the ARP, 1,360, I think. To that, we then look at the highest obstacle and then add 1,000 feet on top of that to calculate our lower safe altitude. So, and we show you which is obviously the higher of the two. So we can see here the highest piece of terrain. We can check our boundary and see if we've got the highest obstacle as well, which is drawing us to this particular place down here, 673 feet, which is correct. It doesn't look like there's anything else down here, which is great. And once we choose to accept that, it will flow back into our flight plan as a user lower safe. So for those who have just joined, you should be able to see an iPad screen, and there should be a red arrow which is pointing to the bits and pieces that I'm talking to. If you're having any difficulty, maybe try rejoining the webinar. Otherwise, there'll be a recording available later where you will see the red arrows. Now, we have the use at lower safe altitude. So again, double tap on the particular line in the track in our flight plan, brings up the lower safe altitude calculator, which brings up this boundary. Now, we may not want to use the standard IFR sort of 7 nautical mile boundary. And we have the option to change what we see. Oh, one thing I should mention is that everyone, no matter what license you have, will see the boundary depicted on the chart and the indications of the highest terrain and obstacles. The actual calculation part is a premium feature, so it's part of our VFR Plus or IFR Premium package. So that may be why you don't see it on your devices. If you want to upgrade, please feel free to contact us after the show, and we can organise that for you. So we can tap Setup here, and no matter what, you can see this setup because you'll get the option to choose. So we can see all the different boundary types, so we can change it to whatever we want to use. I'll select VFR, 10 nautical miles. And notice once we do that, we've now picked up a different obstacle. We've found one that's on top of Mount Dandenong, 2,625 feet. And the highest piece of terrain's gone up as well. So we can scroll around here and find out where it has. So we've picked up a bit of terrain here. There's the highest piece of terrain. So the number in brackets in our navlog is the grid lower safe. So that's the charted lower safe altitude with a 1 degree square on the map. So these will appear on the Enroute low charts. You'll see them. And we look at all those, and then we determine based on this buffer which grid lower safe. So that's a good place to start from. And when you deviate off track, so when you're flying along here, you know, when you're actually in flight, and I'll show you this later, you'll see the lower safe you calculated in here. Once you fly off track, it then will revert to the highest grid lower safe in the area that you're in as well. So, and if we don't want to see it anymore, we can either double tap again or tap cancel. So again, if we look at our route to Albury, double tap, it shows us the highest piece of terrain down here and the highest obstacle over here. Highest terrain, highest obstacle, calculate lower safe. Once we've checked it, and the theory is that you actually go and check it to make sure that we did the right thing, and then you tap accept. Once we do that, anytime that we fly along this particular route in the future, we'll automatically pick up that calculated lower safe, so you don't have to keep calculating all the time. Now, AvPlan also includes a ruler for measuring tracks and distances. So to bring up the ruler on the map, use a 2-finger tap and hold, and you'll see the ruler appear, and then we can move our fingers around to measure things off the chart. That ruler will stay there. We can move the map around, but as soon as we zoom the map, the ruler will disappear. So we can use it to sort of measure things along our route and so on. So 2-finger tap and hold on the map and move around. We've had some suggestions recently about then fine-tuning this with your fingers, so we'll be doing some improvements to the ruler shortly. Any other time that you have an idea that might improve the software, feel free to feed it back to us, because we're all eyes and ears. Most of what you see today is from ideas from people like you of how to make it better. So yes, we welcome all feedback that you may have. So AvPlan has the ability to overlay airport diagrams and approach plates on the map. So one of the easiest ways to look at an airport is to just zoom in on the map. So if we look here at Albury, you can see our runway end extensions, and they'll disappear when we get to a certain zoom level. And then it'll transition to showing you the airport diagram. You'll notice that there's the end of our runway, and that'll be where it appears on the map. So when we zoom in. So when we display the airport diagram, you can obviously see where you are and so on. There's some controls down here to change the opacity of that overlay. And then we can use this clear button to take the chart off the map if we don't want to see it anymore. So again, if you want to find out where we're taxiing at Moorabbin, you can just sort of zoom in on the map and it'll display it like that. And then tap clear down the bottom right to take it off the map. That's an airport diagram. They automatically appear for every subscriber. And then from premium customers, we also have the ability to overlay approach plates. So that can be done from the map just by tapping on the map, and we get the waypoint details box. We can scroll down, and then we can pick all the approach plates down the bottom here, and we can pick the one we want to display on the map. So the RNAVZ runway 07 or RNAV Zulu, and then tap on this icon on the right hand side that looks like a arrow pointing at a map. So tap on that and it'll overlay the approach plate on the map itself. The benefit of doing it on the map isn't necessarily great for flying approaches, but before you get to an approach, it's a great way of seeing the impact of things like weather and traffic that may have onto your approach, because they are all overlaid and so on. The train warning system also works, the obstacle warnings, and obviously you can see the depiction of airspace as well. So we have a great sort of way of maintaining situational awareness as we fly up to an airport. And especially when the weather's changing and you've got some weather coming in, you can actually see sort of what approach do I fly that might keep me out of the weather for longer. And you have some idea of what might be changing while you're actually flying the approach. So again, when we don't want to see it anymore, we can tap clear. And going back to that, if we want to view a different approach, we can tap on the map, scroll down and pick a different approach. Or if you want to look at the terminal page and see it in full screen, we tap on the left-hand side, and that will open the terminal page for that place and show you the plate in full screen. So obviously this is a much better way of actually flying an approach, because you can actually read things like the profile and it's unobstructed. So we're not drawing things like your route all over the map and obstructing these details here that you really need to see. So as you can see in our sort of profile view, we even clip off the bits of the map or the overlays that sort of aren't applicable on the actual plan view. So you can read all the details. And I think that's particularly important. Now, AvPlan obviously has the ability to create multiple stage flight plans. So we've got a single stage here. So from Rabin to Albury via our little user waypoint. And say we want to create a landing point in our plan. And then create a second stage. We can do a number of things. You can do a tap and hold or just a simple swipe. And then tap more. And that'll give us a whole bunch of options that we can do at that particular waypoint. We can activate that leg. We can go direct to there. We can find out information about it. Or we can land here and create a second stage. So that creates another landing point. You see now here on the left-hand side, we've got the second stage of our flight plan. And we could just type into the quick edit box here and type in where we want to go, or I'll show you another way, which is just tapping on the map. So say we want to go here to Dubbo. We tap on the map near Dubbo. There it is here. We can see the airport. You see what the weather's like, and we can tap the plus to add it to our flight plan. Now, when we're doing an IFR flight plan, because we're in IFR mode here, we can choose to go direct or by any connected or shortest IFR routes, or find if there's any recently filed flights between those two places as well. So we can choose to copy that. So I will choose to fly by Whiskey 638. So it populates all the Enroute waypoints. You can see we've now got things like the VOR frequency in here, VOR frequency at Parks, and the NDB at Dubbo, for those who still have an NDB in their aircraft. And if you don't have an NDB in your aircraft, how do you listen to the cricket? That's what I want to know. So yes, so we populate that in our flight plan and we're all ready to go. Now, a common thing is once we've got a second stage, how do we add an alternate? Say the weather isn't particularly good, we need an alternate for Albury. So we want to have Corowa as our alternate for Albury. Well, once upon a time there was pretty only one way, but now it's pretty simple. We can just tap on the map at Corowa, find there. We can tap on the airport symbol, brings up the waypoint details for Corowa, and we can scroll this all the way down to the bottom, and we have the option to add a destination alternate for a particular stage or an en route alternate. We won't do en routes at the moment, but we'll do a destination alternate for stage 1. Tap on that, adds it to our navlog here on the left-hand side. We can now see Corowa there in the grey, and we can see it depicted on the map as a grey line as well. So we can add alternates to any stage that way. So for example, if we want to carry, I think that's Mudgee as an alternate for Dubbo, we can tap on the map near Mudgee, tap on the airport symbol, brings up the waypoint details for Mudgee, scroll right down the bottom, and add a destination alternate for stage 2. So there we go, and there's Mudgee as our alternate. Once we've added an airport that's either a takeoff, landing, or alternate, you'll bring up the runway end extensions, which you can see depicted here. They don't appear for any other aerodrome, so they need to be in your flight plan as a departure destination or alternate. So for those that fly twins and so on, I might want to create Enroute Alternates. So they're depicted in our plan, and we'll alter things around the critical point calculations. So for example, to do that for stage 2, let's bring up Condobolin as a Enroute alternate for stage 2. Again, scroll down the bottom, add Enroute alternate stage 2. And that affects the the critical point calculations, and my iPad stopped sharing. It affects the critical point calculations, and we'll calculate any additional fuel that may be required as we're going along. I'm just trying to resize this iPad screen. By default, it comes up as full screen, which is, I think, too big for you guys to see. Okay. And we're back. Sorry about that. Wonders of technology. So there's a number of settings in your aircraft profile that can modify the critical point calculations. So you can set up ones for, say, single engine or depressurization or so on. So once we've got our multi-stage flight plan, we can actually pop in some departure times in here, 600, and think about filing our flight plan. So we do that under planning. So we can do things like under planning. Planning is designed to be a workflow that you start at the top and you work your way down the bottom. So we can create a new flight plan. Premium subscribers can import a flight plan that was filed with another system. So by entering in a previously filed flight plan, we can tap on optimize altitude, which uses the aircraft performance and the winds of the day to show us the most optimum altitude to fly at. So I can tap on 9,000 and fly the first stage at 9,000. If I scroll down and see stage 2 Albury to Dubbo with an alternate Mudgee, I can then again pick 9,000 for example, and it populates our flight plan over here. We can look at a report, or we can do weight and balance. So we can put people in the aircraft. We can put fuel in the tanks. Once we do that, we'll populate the envelope with the takeoff weight, landing weight, and zero fuel weight. We'll do the same calculations over here and display it. If you any of these limits are exceeded, they'll turn red. So if we put 500 pounds in here, we've exceeded the load limit in the load station, so it's gone over there. We'll 600 pounds in the back, and you'll see now we're way over the limits, and there's our takeoff weight and zero fuel weight. It's been exceeded there. Now this is for our first stage, Moorabbin to Albury. We can then swipe this page and see what our second leg or second stage from Albury to Dubbo looks like. Again, we've left the unburned fuel in the tanks, so we've assumed that the variable reserve is fuel, and you can then choose to add more fuel. If you want to do this weight and balance setup for your aircraft, just tap the cog up here and we can change the empty weight and empty arm in here, and the units can be changed here as well. So once we're happy with that, we can go back to planning. We can get a SPIB briefing for our route. So for the 2 stages, including alternates, it's created for me. As you can see here, we've got the weather, NOTAMs, usual kind of briefing stuff, and then all the new weather charts down the bottom. So for the GAF and grid point wind and temperature charts. You can print this under planning print send when we get down to the bottom. We can look and see if there's any restricted areas and if they're active or not. And for ones that are active, we can tap on the eye to see when they're active or where they are on the map. So yes, that's the dish. And then we can file our flight plan, submit ICAO flight plan via NAPES. Now this has changed in the last sort of year or so, 18 months, to be the full ICAO form. And you can pretty much change everything in this form and it flows back into either your saved flight plan or into the aircraft profile. So when you reuse it, you're all good. So each page is for a single stage, and if we want to change stages, we can tap the stage button to select which stage we want. So let's just do the first one for the moment. Our flight rules, operation type, number of aircraft, this is all pretty straightforward. The aircraft type, performance category. Any changes, as I mentioned here, flow back into the aircraft profile and get saved. So next time we use FSF, for example, it'll pre-populate all this information. Departure point, number of people on board, departure time. So we can change our departure time in here pretty quickly. Up the top here, you're putting your NAPES details and it saves them forever. If you ever need to change your NAPES password or update your details, best do that on the NAPES website and then pop the new details in here. So we've got our routing here, altitudes, en route time, endurance. We can actually even change our fuel load. So if we want a little bit more time, we can tap on this and 70 gallons in here, and then our endurance will be updated. Any remarks about your stage can go in here. So things like if you're flying angel flights, you might put some details like CSF in there. Other details, so these are the other details that are potentially things like delays, nav, com, alternate, a whole bunch of different possible options in here. Any special handling, so that's if you're aeromedical and that kind of stuff. There's our destination, our alternate. We can delete that and create a different alternate here as well. Emergency details, SAR time. One thing to note, if you do fly IFR, is that you cannot submit an SAR time for departure for IFR flights. NAPES does not support it. It's not that we can't do it, it's NAPES will reject it. It just doesn't do it. So if you need to do a SAR time for departure, you need to either handle it yourself or with a responsible person, or after you file a flight plan, ring the briefing office, get them to change it. You can use no-send, so that will send a test flight plan, and we can tap submit. This will submit all stages, by the way, so we could tap up here and look at our second stage. But anyway, we'll file a flight plan. Once we do this, we will start monitoring your plan. This is one of the really interesting parts of AvPlan EFB. AvPlan itself it's a bit like a iceberg would be a great analogy. So you see the little bit of the tip on the top, but there's a whole bunch of systems that sit behind it that you don't see. The things like our CASA approved data management systems and so on. One of the things that we have is we ingest worldwide weather data in almost, and keep that updated in almost real time, so that once you file a flight plan, we start monitoring it, so that if the weather or a NOTAM is issued that affects your flight plan, we will send you notifications. So some of you have probably seen these before. So that if a SIGMET is issued that your route touches, if an AirMet, so AirMets are the way that area forecasts or changes to area forecasts are now published. So once upon a time, the Bureau would just send out a new area forecast, but nowadays they will not amend an area forecast or a GAF. They will issue a AirMet that changes the GAF. They'll send a correction for a GAF if they've made a mistake, but if the weather changes, then they'll just issue an AirMet around those changes to the AirMet. The changes to the GAF. So any of those things we send, if there's a specky METAR for your origin or destination or alternates, we will send you an alert with what that specky is. Speckies indicate that there's changing weather or rapidly changing weather at a certain point at a METAR reporting station. So we see that as being something that you particularly need to be aware of. And additionally, if there is a amended TAF, so we'll send you a notification of an amended TAF. And lastly is NOTAM. So we're monitoring your destination point, and if a NOTAM is issued a new NOTAM is issued that is applicable for your arrival time, we'll send you a notification about that as well. A good example of this would be an RFDS flight coming into Essendon a couple of years ago. A King Air had landed at Essendon, had a landing gear failure where one of the right or left main gears actually fell off, and the aircraft came to a standstill at the intersection of both runways at Essendon. So we sent notifications automatically to a number of inbound flights who were able to organise a diversion 30 minutes ahead, because they knew what was going on. These sort of things like NOTAMs and stuff will not get told to you by air traffic control. It'll just be up to you to arrive in the terminal area, listen to the ATIS and find that the airport is actually closed. So that's an extreme example, but one where we actually had a pretty good outcome. So these notifications come to you as push notifications, and they can be viewed under planning and then flight status. So they'll appear here as messages. For the things that cover an area like an AirMet or a SIGMET, you'll see a little map, you'll see a flight plan, and a little picture and so on like that. Otherwise, there'll be a text description of the METAR or SIGMET or METAR or TAF or NOTAM. There'll be little red little banners here that will direct you to here. Once the messages are 8 hours old, they get purged. So hence the reason you don't see anything in here for any sort of old flights. And we've got a whole bunch of other plans for this flight status. We're working with Air Services on, and we're prototype things like getting your actual transponder code when you're taxiing and a few other things as well. So sent to you as notifications. So for those flying IFR soon, you'll be able to, once you file your flight plan, before you taxi, you'll see what your score code will be and what your anticipated departure, if there's a SID, what SID you've been assigned, that kind of stuff. So you can have that all programmed and ready to go before you even start your engines. So one common question is, once we've filed our flight plan, but it's a no-send flight plan, you can see that down here. There's no send. How do we file a real flight plan? So it's actually simply a case of turning no send off and tapping submit again. What that'll do is create a real flight plan from our origin to destination. So replacing this no send flight plan. So there we go. And you'll notice up the top, we get the big green filed OK. So we're all good to go. You don't see filed OK when you file a no send. You only see it when you only see it when you submit a real flight plan. So another common question is, how do we amend a flight plan? If we want to change the departure time of a particular leg, so say for stage 2, all we need to do is change our departure time. Just change 0900, tap submit. And that'll send a flight plan amendment for that particular stage. So there we go. And now we've got a 0900 departure time. And lastly, another common question is then how do we delete it? So back under planning, once we've filed a flight plan, we can see this delete Nate's flight plan, and we can tap on that to cancel our flight notification. If we get a cancellation, it will specify that we've cancelled the plan. We can also cancel SAR time. So if you're doing a VFR SAR time, we can cancel and amend it here as well. Print send allows us to print copies of our flight plan, NAPE submission, load sheets, weather information, and then all our charts to an AirPrint compatible printer or as PDF files. So if we want to transfer a PDF copy of our flight plan, just our thing, we can clear all of the little things, tick that, and then email or send to another app. So that might be Dropbox or whatever. We can also, we have a bunch of different options that we sort of support exporting a flight plan. So we can email or airdrop a copy of the sort of digital flight plan as an exact copy to another person. So we can send it via email or we can airdrop it to someone else or send it to another app. For those that have flight stream 210, 510 in their aircraft, we can actually transfer that plan via Garmin Pilot into the Garmin avionics, but that does require a subscription to Garmin Pilot. For those that have a 210 or a 510, you probably already have a subscription to Garmin Pilot if you use a database concierge product. So that's the thing that does the wireless database updates to your avionics. So if you have that, you've probably already got Garmin Pilot, and we'll transfer flight plans from your aircraft, from your iPad via Garmin Pilot straight into your avionics. We can do the same thing with the Dyna Skyview. So that's what this option is here. So doing a flight plan transfer to your Garmin Skyview. FPL files used by older Garmin devices like the G1000, those kind of things. So that you have to write the file to an SD card and actually physically plug it into the aircraft. It's a little bit fiddly. You can do the tweety, Facebooky thing. And lastly, you can sync it via our cloud service to your other devices. So one thing we've built is a whole sort of synchronization service where you can synchronize aircraft details, flight plans, annotations, notes, those kind of things from your iPad, one iPad to another, or from your iPad to your iPhone. It's designed in such a way that you can do all the things on one, and then if one iPad fails, pick up, and most if not all your data is already there, ready to go. So that's a sort of example of sort of two-state or creating sort of complex flight plans, and then the ease that you can submit them and file them and that kind of stuff. The map has a whole bunch of different weather options. One of the things that we were discussing before were the metars, so I can tap on them and then see the active weather. So the weather overlays are controlled by the little weather radar icon up, or the sort of radar looking icon at the top right. And then we see all the different weather options like weather radar, infrared satellite, the static ones, metars, SIGMETs, lightning, weather cameras. Weather cameras are interesting. Turn them on. Then you get the little camera icons, such as here. Any of these sort of camera icons that are coloured, that means there's a METAR reporting station. Ooh, and the weather is, and they're colour coded based on the METAR. The AvPlan heads-up display and what happens when we're flying. It's a good question. Now the heads-up display are these boxes at the top of the map page here. We can overlay that by tapping map settings, and then show HUD. So it brings up this. The options that you see here may not be what you see. You can actually change what you see here. So, there's our altitude, the lower safe altitude, the leg we're flying, but we're not flying anywhere. So we're just showing you the grid lower safe where we are. Tracks, TASs, ground speed, distance to next waypoint and destination, ETA destination or next, area frequency where we are and where we're going. We're not going anywhere, so it's disabled. Tap and hold on a particular cell and you get all the other different options that you can use when to change what you see. So you can see things like the latitude, longitude, GPS horizontal error, cross-track error, airspace that you're in, start-stop timer, rate of descent to destination, the QNH and surface wind where we are, and the QNH and surface wind at your destination. Those two values come from the nearest METAR or the nearest METAR to your destination. Right. So yeah, lots of different options. You can figure it how you wish. Now, when we're actually flying, when we start taxiing, we do things like we recommend you tap fly above our flight plan. That obviously changes the way the obstacle warnings work. So here we go. Here's highlighting obstacles that are a factor based on our cruise altitude currently at 52 feet. So it's showing you within 10 nautical miles any applicable obstacles. The red ones are the ones that are at your altitude and higher. Yellow, 1,500 feet to 500 feet. The map itself is less responsive. I can turn and orientate the map any which way I like. I can use these buttons down the bottom here to either center my aircraft or lock the map orientation, north up, track up, that kind of thing. When we're in fly mode, we start the track log recording. That's a little green line that the aircraft leaves behind you. Now we taxi, we take off. Now when we reach the departure point, and that's the point where you would normally look at your watch and go, oh yeah, that's my departure time. So in AvPlan, we can tap this departure button at the top. What that will do, when we tap it, we'll log our departure time in our flight plan and update our ETAs in here, down our first stage. So we tap departure. It's logged our UTC departure time 0507 and then updated our ETAs based on our planned time intervals. Now, the beauty of AvPlan is that we're calculating these based on your aircraft performance profile, taking into account climb and cruise, and not the GPS ground speed. At the moment, we're cruising at a huge 0 knots, so we'll pretty much never get there, as this will say that the time intervals are very, very long. For those that fly IFR, an IFR departure is now just reading these boxes back. So, I'm Foxtrot Sierra, Foxtrot departing Moorabbin 07, tracking 013, climbing 9,000, lake at 39er. So I've just got to read the numbers back. There's no mental arithmetic. I'm particularly bad at mental arithmetic, so that's why I wrote the software to behave this way, so it could pretty much tell me what I need to say. Anything that uses just GPS is just plain wrong when we're in climb. Ground speed's really low, so it's no good for giving a departure report. So AvPlan does all that stuff for us. It's showing us our active leg is now magenta. It's showing the HUD's now showing us where we're going. We're flying to lake, and our lowest safe altitude for this leg is 4,900 feet, which is our user calculated lowest safe. Now, once we fly 7 nautical miles off track, that number will revert to being the grid lowest safe, which will be that number in brackets. We do that all automatically. I'll see our distances have all updated to next waypoint, destination, and so on. As we fly along, once we get to this waypoint, the app will automatically transition to the next waypoint. Good point. If you forget all the direct or the departure buttons and so on, once the app detects you in the air and you're 2 nautical miles from the airfield, we will then log your departure time and backdate it slightly and log that to your flight plan and start everything running. So you don't need to remember to press departure, but it always helps. If you forget, that's fine. We don't just do it based on speed, because that's at the point that you would leave the runway, which is not when you depart, because you might be doing maneuvering around the airport before you leave. So think about taking off and then flying around and tracking overhead. So that extra 2 minutes that you spent in climb maneuvering around the airport is before you actually depart. The app itself logs your wheels on, wheels off time when you take off and land, and your departure times and so on. And all these changes in times are logged with your flight plan as you fly along till you get to your destination. Oh, got to use the iPad. Scroll down, and then we land at Albury. This has transitioned to, landing here. Once we stop the aircraft, we can pop ourselves back in plan mode. The app's now stopping logging our location, those kind of things. When we take off for our next leg, we can either tap departure here, or another option is to tap and hold on the leg of our flight plan here, so Albury, and we can activate leg, and that sets our departure time for Albury and so on. You can see here the weather's a bit different, so Wagga, we're now blue, not green. So it's VFR, but clouds less than 3,000 feet. And again, we fly to our destination, and then we pop the app back in plan mode when we're done. It doesn't do it automatically yet, but we do have some enhancements planned later this year that will improve the logging of flights and so on, and that's one of the things that we'll be doing. So it'll pop itself back into plan mode automatically without you having to do anything. Now, this is the way I tend to talk a lot, and I've still got lots of things that I wanted to cover. One was the terminal page. Terminal's where all the sort of airport information lives. So we can get to an airport quickly in 3 different ways. One is to read everything in the terminal page like a book. We can tap on a particular row of the flight plan. Here I'll tap on Moorabbin, and it brings up Moorabbin on the terminal page. Details about Moorabbin, we can find it on the map. We can look at the weather cameras just by tapping the little camera icon. There we go. Lovely. We can look at on the leg details, which is the first page. First, we've got information about a particular leg. And this is a way of doing things like logging your actual fuel on board as you're flying along for a particular waypoint. So for example, if I tap on lake, brings up lake on the terminal page. Under leg details, we can log how much fuel we actually have on board at that particular point so that we can say, sort of see at a glance, if we're ahead or behind the plan, there's an actual time of arrival, we can add notes in here and they're stored with the flight plan. We have the option to actually put things like the top of climb, top of descent points in our flight plan now. So under settings, there's a option under user settings. So settings, user settings, auto waypoints in plan. When I do that, it adds, you notice, additional waypoints in here. We've got a top of climb, a critical point, top of descent. Now, the important thing about doing that is that we can do things like, for a top of climb point, we can tap on that and log our actual fuel on board at top of climb and create a note and say my destination fuel will be X. Now, this is one way that you can do all the lovely CASA compliance things that came in CAT 234-1. So we pretty much handle everything that's in there, things like additional fuel calculations and so on. This is yet another way that we can cover that off. So they're auto waypoints in plan. And if you see them and you don't want to see them, settings, user settings, auto waypoints in plan. Communications information at a particular place. Obviously our top of climb somewhere near Lilydale, so we populated the Lilydale CTAF in there, which is kind of interesting. Wonder what Met shows. Oh yeah, no TAF or NET. No TAM, there won't be anything there either. Let's go to Moorabbin. Net information, so you got the raw TAF and then the decoded TAF below. One thing that people don't know, you've got this magnifying glass if you want to see it. And many of us are wearing glasses these days, so you get a blown up version. So just sort of tap and hold on a particular cell and we can see what it is. So for that raw text. And then, so that's the TAF, and then the NOTAM, the meta, sorry, is again there and it's all decoded for you. And lastly, right down the bottom, we can get nearby TAFs and metas. So if you're flying towards a place, the weather starts to get a bit iffy, we can just see at a glance where we should go, which is useful. That all came from a day when I was flying into Moorabbin. The weather turned particularly nasty. I was doing it with another person that was on the call. They were in a different aircraft and we arrived at Moorabbin. Suddenly it's below minima and we had to find somewhere else to go. So the other person went to Essendon. I went actually into Moorabbin, but I just got visual. So yes, then this feature came along. So at a glance, we can see in real time, because this updates in real time, as long as you've got network access, you can see, what the weather is. When you put these auto waypoints in your plan, they don't get sent with your flight plan because they're just points along your route. And the top of climb, top of descent points come out of your aircraft profile because based on your rate of climb and ground speeds and those kind of things, that's where how we calculate those points. So terminal page can be reached by tapping on it. So we'll tap on Albury, we get the terminal page for Albury, and we're on the net page, so we've got the weather. And then we swipe for the particular charts. So there we go. All full of swipey goodness. 3-finger tap brings up icons for all the plates, and we can quickly find the one that we want. So again, 3 fingers gets this row of things. And lastly, we can read it like a book. So that book icon shows you both the airport and all airports. We can search for an airport, or we can look at the plates for a particular airport. Notice on the right-hand side here, we've got these little stars. That shows us we can create, that's how we create favorites. Currently, we've got favorites up here, but it's empty. So let's create one. So commonly what I would do is favorite the approach that I expect to fly and potentially the airport diagram. So we'll tap the star here to favorite the approach, and there it goes up in our favorites, and star to do the airport diagram. So now we've got them both up here. So now, when we want to go to somewhere, we can just open up the, tap the book and then tap the particular plate, and it brings up that approach plate. One other sort of unknown feature in AvPlan is once you've got a plate up here and you land at the airport, the app will transition to showing you the taxi diagram and do it automatically once I think your ground speed falls below about 30 knots. So particularly useful at places like Moorabbin and Bankstown and stuff where they want to give you or you need to give your sort of location on the aerodrome once you've rolled off the runway. Otherwise they get grumpy at you. Well, they're always getting grumpy at me anyway. So yes, those favorites synchronize across your devices. So once you've seen one, you've seen them all. We have the ability to annotate these plates. So if we go to the airport diagram, for example, we can do things like draw our taxi clearance. So you can double tap on the map, brings up this editing bar up the top, and we can then draw our taxi clearance in here with our finger. And we can either double tap or press that done button here at the top right to close. So very useful for doing things like that, or drawing where you want to approach. You can actually annotate it with text and thinner lines. You can pretty much do whatever you like. You can then, it will synchronize between your devices. So if you've got another iPad, those annotations will copy over. And lastly, you can, with that button, send those annotations to another user. So if you've marked up an approach plate for some reason, you can then send those annotations to someone else. You can tap done. And another very unknown feature is the ability to do the same thing with the maps in AvPlan. So we can tap that cog and tap Annotate Map. And now we have the ability to draw on the actual maps and place text on the maps themselves. We can change the font and all that rubbish. We can move them around. So yeah, there we go. And yeah, if I had another device, you'd see that as well. So once we want to get rid of it, we can tap the little bin icon and get rid of the annotations. And tap done, and it's all gone. Back to normal mode. I think I've pretty much run out of time. I've taken way too much. And I might start going through some of the questions that I can see that sort of I either haven't finished or haven't answered. So the annotations aren't saved with the flight plan. The annotations are saved on the device. So they'll disappear when they're not associated with a plan in any way. So to export a flight plan in Gpx format. So we've got our flight plan here. We can tap the send button under the flight plan, and these options here will send, email, airdrop the flight plan in Gpx format. And that will include the waypoints, the route, and the track log, which is a little, the green line that the aircraft leaves behind you. Now to connect AvPlan EFB to Xplane, we do all our testing with Xplane and or Microsoft Flight Simulator. To connect the app to Xplane, we tap settings and then user settings, and then use this option here to turn it on. So once we turn on the Xplane interface, the GPS is completely disabled. So one thing to do is, if the GPS isn't working, is to go in here and toggle this off and on just to make sure you haven't inadvertently turned it on. And this is the current sort of network address of your iPad, and you'll need to configure Xplane to talk or send data to that particular IP address. Our user manual, which is available on our website, talks about this in a lot more detail, so feel free to do that. So the Gpx export is everything. You can't pick and choose what you want. We are pulling apart the flight plan and the track log. Currently, they're bound together in one little unit, so soon that will not be the case, and you'll be able to export your sort of track log separately from the flight plan. So, because we come from a flight plan background, everything used to be bound with a flight plan. The app sort of wouldn't even function. We didn't even have initially a direct to mode when it was initially released, because the developer, me, sort of had a very much, I go places when I go flying. So you put a plan in and off you go. A good question around stored plan management. So once we've created a flight plan, we can then save it when we go back, and it then goes in our list of, in this case, not necessarily extensive. The busy symbol is it for synchronizing those changes with my other device. Now we are in the process of creating a folder structure that you can create here for your stored flight plans. It's in version 8. Which is coming around the middle of the year, probably July, August. And that has the ability to sort flight plans, change their orders, search for things. You can create folders that then creates previews of a whole route pack in a folder, and you can see the flight plan in the folders and any of the routes and all that sort of stuff. AvPlan version 8 also includes our completely new mapping engine, and that's where the delays have come in, because we're completely re-engineering the way we do maps. But it is definitely going to be worth the wait. So there was a question around winds aloft. So how do we look at winds aloft? Our flight plan itself, has the wind for a particular altitude, and if we tap on a particular place, say lake, it opens a terminal page, and under winds we can see the winds at the different levels, and we can see the head or tailwind component at any particular level as well. So we can sort of see the vertical wind profile and pick the best altitude. And the altitude optimizer sort of does that at a certain degree as well. So that's what it does for all altitudes. Great question around favourite airports on the home screen, so we don't need to tap on identify. Not at the moment, but we can definitely get that added. That's a great question. Option to change US gallon figures to a decimal place. We could get that done. Anything can be done. At the moment, we show them just in whole units. You can enter the values with decimals, but we only display them in whole US gallons. Just to be clear, you can change the fuel units very quickly in here to things like litres, and then we're displaying all the values in litres. And there is a request in our queue to enter both fuel values. So if you're doing weight fuel, so that'll be kilos or pounds, and then litres or US gallons in there, and use them interchangeably. So that's coming. All the internal calculations are done in litres, so we just if you got lots of SAR times under planning SAR times, the easiest way to delete ones you don't want to see anymore is to swipe to delete. or I think we've done that, only write the code, or tap on each one and go cancel via voice, and then that'll just delete them. I think I've covered off many of these questions. I've got an awful lot. One thing we've learned is having a lot of people on the line is you all send lots of questions, so it might help actually have two people, one person actually answering. And the other thing is that we have a limit of 100 people, which is probably why all the phone calls kept happening when I started this. So please feel free to type in some more questions, but I might stop the recording now and we'll see how we go.